In this video, we'll have a look on how you can expose any SharePoint modern page in Microsoft Teams as a personal application. And what it means is that you can expose modern SharePoint pages in the left navigation bar, and you can even control to which users in your organization these applications, the personal applications, will be there by default. So you can actually control these visibilities or the application visibility in the left navigation. The typical scenario would be something like you want to expose your corporate communication or intranet landing page on the left navigation of Microsoft Teams, so you can actually take advantage the best of the both worlds. So you have the collaboration tooling in the Microsoft Teams, the chatting, the calling, and all of that stuff, the video channels and other functionalities. But then you have the corporate communicational news and articles and guidance embedded directly into Microsoft Teams. So which is a quite typical scenario. Now, we are recording this video and this version of the video in June 2020, and this is an area where we are adding additional capabilities and we are investing from an engineering perspective. So this is provided as a preview integration path between the SharePoint Online and Microsoft Teams. It will get better, and right now there are certain limitations which we'll have a briefly look on the video as well. Now, what would be then the scenario? So as we mentioned already that you want to expose the corporate communication or portal, for example, in the Microsoft Teams. That would be one of the scenario. You might want to expose, for example, the learning pathways, our guidance and learning paths for people to use Microsoft 365 directly in the Microsoft Teams. That would be one really good example scenario. Or you might have any other important SharePoint modern pages which you want to actually expose for your employees in the left navigation. So using this tutorial and this steps in here, you can easily make that happen, and it will work in both web client and in a desktop client, and well, actually also in a mobile client. So we have an end-to-end scenario in our hands, or end-to-end scenario which we can actually use. Now, let's actually get moving and let's see how we make this happen in practice. So first of all, in my environment, we're using the Microsoft Teams. There's a relatively small amount of example channels and example teams available in here, and we're going to expose the portal, in my case, in the left navigation pane. So you can actually even control which application will be available in the left navigation pane, and we'll come back on that one slightly later on the videos. So in my case, I'm going to use the perspective example, which is one of our corporate communicational examples, which are available from the SharePoint Lookbook site. So SharePoint Lookbook site is a great way of actually giving a starting point or an example content as a administrator. And in the future, you don't necessarily have to be an administrator for all of these templates, but you can easily click add to your tenant. And that's the way I provision this example content already with example files and structures and all of that. So I can actually demonstrate the scenario. Now, rather than demanding your employees to move between the SharePoint Online portal and then the Microsoft Teams and not really having an easy way to do transition between the application, we can actually merge these together. And that's really the key and the objective of this tutorial. So first of all, let's start by installing App Studio in the Microsoft Teams. So let's go to the three dots in here. Or we can go, well, let's actually go from there to the More Apps. And then I want to install App Studio, which is the one which we use to create the needed definition. And this is actually no code option. So you might actually even debate that this is a developer tool because we're not going to actually write any code. So we're just adding configurations to expose any SharePoint page inside of the Microsoft Teams in this case. So let's add the App Studio in. Well, we're adding the App Studio for me as a user, as a personal application. And in here, we then go to the manifest editor, and that's where we actually start creating the content and creating the structures. So we're going to create a new application, create a new app. And based on our guidance, I'm going to actually just copy the values which we're providing. So let's give it a name. Let's give it a full name, like company intranet, whatever is your preference, whatever you want to call it out. And we want to generate the unique ID for the application. Let's give also it a package name, and let's use version of 1.00. We can set the description as what we want, but I'm going to use the values which we suggest in our written tutorial as well. So let's actually copy those values of my first intranet application, my awesome intranet application to embed modern SharePoint in Teams. Now on the developer information, we can call here Contoso, and let's say the website is also www.contoso.com. It doesn't really matter. You can actually pinpoint to any location. I'm going to just use example data in here. The developer information is not that widely visible. It's exposed only if you go to the application settings. You can actually see this information, but update those accordingly for your information. Now, for partner information and MPN ID, which is the Microsoft Partner Network ID, we're going to leave it empty because this is not going to be a store application and it doesn't make sense as such. Now, for the privacy, again, we need to have some sort of a privacy entries. So let's actually call and set that as privacy, and term the URL for terms of usage. Not really super important again in this case because we are using or creating an application internally in our company. So it's not like we're pushing an application into App Source, but let's add some values there. They are mandatory entries as well. Now, in my case, I'm not going to set any branding values in here, but obviously in your case, in the official setup, you would like to definitely do that. You can have a full color logo of your company and then a transparent outline updated here accordingly. The transparent outline would be aligning, for example, that transparent outline logo there, which is the App Studio one. So you would have then visibility on, the company logo on the left navigation. You know that you can access the corporate communication site when you click that logo. But again, in our case, we kind of leave it empty for now. Now that's the basic setup, and that's good. And then we want to go to the tab section, and we want to create a personal tab. So it is actually behaving like the App Studio. So it actually is not installed inside of a team. It is accessed through the left navigation. So let's actually do that. So I'm going to click Add. And let's give the tab a name. So let's give it a name called Intranet. Let's give it a unique ID. It doesn't really matter as long as it's unique inside of the solution. And since we only have a one tab in this case, it's not actually that difficult thing to do. Now, this is the critical part. Now, if you would only take the URL, the website URL, and pinpoint to that one, this solution would only work in the web client. So that means that it wouldn't work if people are using the desktop client, and we want this to work with the desktop client. So we need to do some adjustments related on the content URL. And how do we do that? Well, in my case, I'm going to use simply Notepad. And I actually have already URL here available. So because we want to expose the perspective URL of the perspective portal from this URL and the actual page which we actually have there. Let me go there as well. Getting served is in the site pages.home ASPX. This is the page which we want to actually surface inside of that application. So that's the URL. And what I've done here is that I've actually taken, based on the guidance, based on the example, we updated the domain URL section. And based on my domain URL, as we can see from the URL there. And then we're adding here _layers15 teams logging.aspx, SPFX true destination, and this is where we are actually moving into. And you might be wondering why we need to do this. That's because the SharePoint is hosted in a different URL than the Microsoft Teams, and we need to do the single sign-on transition between these applications, so it doesn't actually cause any challenges. And that's basically why we need to add this additional, let's say, transition or a jump. Basically, what happens behind the scenes is that we will access this Teams logging, and then we will be redirected to this URL as the end access. From an end user perspective, you don't actually see the transition, so it's all good. So what I'm doing now is that I'm copying that entry. Let's go back in my App Studio. Let's add to content URL and paste that one in. For the website URL, we're going to actually leave it completely empty, and let's click Save. And that's the whole configuration needed to make the personal application or personal tab to be available in this solution. Now, before we can test it, we need to configure this slightly. So we need to add some settings in the domains and permissions. First of all, we need to make sure that the domains from your tabs includes the right domain. So this is there by default, so it should work okay for you as well. But we would also need to have AAD app ID updated based on our guidance and the documentation. So we're adding here this 0003 unique GUID, which is actually the unique GUID of SharePoint Online. Technically, if you're not a technical person, you don't need to actually worry about it. It just needs to be there to make sure that the single sign-on transitions are working properly. And then we need to update the single sign-on entry in here. And I need to add the HTTP, the full URL with an HTTP prefix of the tenant, which we are actually using. So in my case, again, the perspective is at M365X007 and so on, and we can add that one there with a SharePoint.com URL completing that. Now, then we are actually ready to test and distribute this setting. So let me go to the test and distribute, and we can actually click potentially the install option in here, or we can download and save the package or upload the package directly to the app catalog. Now, if I click to install, in my case, we can see that the company settings have not yet allowed to do side loading. And this means that I cannot actually do testing within my tenant. And this probably is the typical setting, what you can see in your case as well. You can actually control the setting if you go to the Teams application and set up policies. And in the setup policies, if we open up the organization-wide policies, we can actually see what is the setting of upload custom apps. So in my case, I just pretty recently set that to be yes, and it takes a while to refresh the settings, and that's why you actually see the exception in the App Studio. But that's fine if you see it as well. That's okay. We can actually download the package in our test environment. So let's allow that download to happen. We can actually see our company intranet zip file over there. And then if we open up that one in a folder, well, it's obviously in my downloads folder as such. And now we can actually install this to our test environment by uploading a custom application. And obviously you need to have the sufficient permission to do this so that you can actually access and add this application to your company app catalog as well. So I'm selecting upload for Contoso, and I'm going to go to the downloads. I'm going to select my zip file, and that's getting updated to be available for Contoso employees. So in my case, I didn't modify the image, and that's why we're seeing that broken picture. We can actually see, well, the default picture in here. We can also see the example title, example description, and all of the settings which we provided as part of the creation of the solution definition in the App Studio. Now, clicking then add, we'll add that one as a personal application to the left panel, and voila, we can actually see the portal being exposed in here, but there are certain things again to call out in the experience. Now, we can first of all see if we go side by side with the SharePoint one and the one which is being exposed in SharePoint within the Teams, we can actually see all of the news. We can see the information and all of that stuff, and you can actually go inside of the articles. You can access the information between what has been published. Now, it's quite important though to notice that we are missing the navigation, and we're missing certain other settings like the footer and so on. So this is right now by design, and there's no way of actually adjusting that. We are working on making this experience better and additional options to be available for you to choose from. And that's why this is provided as a preview integration path, as mentioned when we started configuring this experience in the Microsoft Teams. There will be, like I said, there will be improved experiences on this one later, absolutely. But again, it gives you the access on the news and articles, and then if you need to modify the articles or create the news or create additional content, you would still use the SharePoint Online experience, but from a consuming perspective, you can access the information directly from Microsoft Teams, and that's actually pretty cool from a consumer side perspective. So you can access the corporate communicational information together with your collaboration functionalities and the day-to-day work which you're doing in the Microsoft Teams. And that's pretty cool. Now, what else can we actually do here? So one of the things which is important to notice, again, depending on the settings. So I have now the company intranet installed as my personal application, and slightly depending on settings, I might have the pin option, which basically means that I can pin my own personal applications to be available in the left menu. And that means that if I go back into Teams, if I go back in any of my channels and I can have a discussion with my colleagues, that solution remains on the left navigation. So that's pretty cool. But how would I force all of my employees to actually see that application in the left navigation? And that's where actually our Microsoft Teams application policies are the ones which we can use to set up things. So we can go, for example, to the global org-wide default, and we can add additional applications in here. Now we can go and add a new application. We can, let's dismiss that one, go and add an application, and we can see if we can find our intranet. And there is our company intranet, and we can actually add that one to our policy, clicking add on here. And we can basically say that, hey, this application should be the first one in the left navigation for all of our employees by default. And clicking save will then means that after a while, whoever opens up the Microsoft Teams will have by default the company application visible as the first entry in the Microsoft Teams. And that's actually pretty cool. So you can actually control what is the default setup and what are the applications being visible for your employees and what are the information they can access. Now, what's really, really important also to notice, let's double check that this one is working properly. The same experience actually works properly inside of the Microsoft Teams desktop. So here's the desktop client. Let's actually go in there. We can see that the company intranet working properly in the web client, but if I will actually add or find the intranet from here, I can actually find the company intranet in my side in the desktop client as well. I can add that to the left navigation as a personal application, and it's already actually being added. And that means that I can click 3 dots. The reason why it's actually not visible in here as such is that it doesn't actually refresh. I was just adding that in website, so it's not yet refreshed in here. But let's actually go in here. Let's see if I can actually get it visible and add it. Oh, it's already added. So I now need to actually refresh the page or wait until the setup will actually refresh to get the company application to be visible in here as well. So let's see if we can actually find how we can refresh the UX as easy as possible. And there we go. Now we can actually see that. So it takes a while to refresh. So what I did here is just a forced checked out and checked in, which then basically refreshed my setup of application. And this is mainly because I was doing the setup and configuration and installation and all of that stuff super fast. And that means that the caching and refreshing didn't actually jump in. But I can see now the company application, company intranet being installed to myself. And we can access the company intranet properly from the desktop client as well. And that's actually pretty cool. So let's actually see that it's visible in here. And then obviously you can access the information. You can access the pages in the corporate the SharePoint site and the modern pages, and in this case, the corporate intranet, reading the latest news, reading the latest information, whatever is being exposed here. And the main idea here, however, is exposing individual pages. And as you can see, the top navigation is missing from the desktop client as well. And like I said, we are working on improvements in here. Right now, when this video is being recorded in June 2020, this is the experience, and there's no way for exposing that additional navigation row as such. You can, though, have multiple different tabs in your personal solution, which would be one way of actually exposing multiple different sites if we want to bundle in multiple configurations in a single setup. Now, one other thing which is important to realize is that in this case, we only created a single application. We created a personal application, which is in the left navigation in here. You can actually create also Teams tabs, which would then be able to enable you to expose whatever modern SharePoint pages inside of Microsoft Teams channel. So that would be one option to actually expose things as well. So both of them do work. Both of them are in a preview integration mode, and they will be getting better and better from an integration perspective. But that's pretty much what we did here. So we wanted to expose the modern SharePoint portal inside of the Microsoft Teams. We did that using the personal application mode. Quite simple setup. It's just a matter of setting the URLs properly and then knowing about the limitations which are there for now, which are getting addressed gradually. So you will have a better and better experience with this embedding or integration in the future as well. If you have any questions, please do reach out and have questions related on this one using our community channels and other channels, and we're more than happy to help and get your feedback around these capabilities. And please get yourself also familiar related on the Microsoft Teams policies and app policies, because these will help you to control what is the visibility of your setup and the functionality for individual employees. And what's super, super cool definitely in here is that you can actually have multiple different policies, multiple configurations based on, for example, organizational differences. So you can pinpoint different URLs, pinpoint different portals, different capabilities and applications in the left menu as well. But anyway, that's what we wanted to actually show in this video, and showing that it actually works in the both web client and also in the desktop client. And obviously it would work in a mobile client as well, as long as you follow up on this updated guidance and updated tutorial, which is available in our documentation. Thank you for watching, and one more time, keep the feedback coming. Thank you.